I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all participants in this meeting. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Paul Holton, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm the head of the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program, or CAP for short, at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR. UNIDIR is an independent and autonomous research institute within the United Nations. We focus on disarmament and international security-related issues. Our goal is to assist the international community to develop the practical and innovative ideas needed to find solutions to today's and tomorrow's critical security problems. The program undertakes research to examine the supply side and demand side dynamics of the illicit proliferation of conventional arms and ammunition in order to identify effective measures to tackle the unregulated transfer, illicit circulation, and misuse of conventional arms and ammunition. We share our key findings via advice and support to multilateral processes like the Programme of Action, as well as in efforts to support capacity building for states, regional and international organizations, as we seek to promote ideas and action to prevent and mitigate the negative impact of the unregulated proliferation and misuse of conventional arms and ammunition, and thus laying the foundations for peace, security, and sustainable development. I'd just like to reassure everyone that you're in the right place if you're here for the regional briefing for Africa on preparations for the 8th Biennial Meeting of States on the Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons. We're going to begin promptly now, and I hope that we'll be able to finish by the end of the hour. Please kindly note that cameras and microphones will be off throughout this webinar. That said, we strongly encourage all participants to post their questions using the question and answer function at any time during the event, and you can find this at the bottom of your screen. If time permits, I'll relay these questions to our excellent presenters. And should any questions go unanswered because of time constraints, UNIDIR will follow up with the panelists and provide you with a response bilaterally after the event. Please feel free to indicate your name and affiliation when you pose a question. Please also note that the regional briefings will be recorded and made available on UNIDIR's website and our YouTube channel as well. Now, of course, our reliance on technology to conduct activities in this post-pandemic period cannot be misunderstated. Technology is not perfect, and we have to put in place measures to deal with disruptions. This is a secure platform, and all of you have joined using unique personalized links, but should the platform be compromised, we'll close it down and launch a new meeting, and we'll provide you all with new access links via email, so the event should be able to resume in 5 to 10 minutes. This is only a backup measure, and I'm confident we won't have to use it. Finally, I'd like to stress that UNIDIR promotes the core values of the United Nations: integrity, professionalism, and respect for diversity. As such, UNIDIR is committed to convening diversity in voices and opinions. Nonetheless, the views expressed in the event today are the sole responsibility of individual panelists, and the views do not reflect the views or opinions of the United Nations, UNIDIR, its staff members, or sponsors. Now on to today's event. We understand the importance of enhancing thinking and exchanging ideas on substantive issues in preparation for the 8th Biennial Meeting of States, BMS 8, on the Programme of Action on Small Arms, the PoA, and also the International Tracing Instrument, the ITI. BMS 8 will take place next week in New York from the 27th of June to the 1st of July. National, regional, and global implementation of the PoA and the ITI we think are key in contributing to the comprehensive control of small arms and light weapons throughout their life cycle, as well as in preventing their diversion and misuse. And thus, to support preparations for BMS 8, and thanks to support provided by member states, UNIDIR and ODA are co-organizing a series of online briefings for each UN regional grouping. Each briefing will begin with a discussion consisting of presentations on key topics to be considered during BMS 8, and then we'll provide, time permitting, for questions and answers. We hope that today's event, and indeed the series as a whole, will contribute to enhancing dialogue on some critical aspects of the Programme of Action's implementation at various levels and in different regions. As with all of our activities here at UNIDIR and the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Programme in particular, we welcome your feedback and suggestions on how we can improve our activities. Now, to begin our presentations, I'm delighted to have an opening message from the Chair Designate of BMS 8, His Excellency, Mr. Enrico Manolo.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, delegates. I thank the UNIDIR and UNODA for organizing this regional briefing for each of the 5 regional groups of the United Nations. As BMS 8 is fast approaching, this regional briefing was designed to stimulate thinking and exchange of ideas on substantive issues in preparation for the 8th Biennial Meeting of States on the PoA and ITI, scheduled to take place in New York from 27 June to 1 July 2022. I believe this regional briefing is important and would be helpful to delegates, especially those new to the portfolio, to be better reminded of the key issues and outcomes of BMS 7, to have an overview of the highlights in the PoA/ITI implementation, to zero in on key concerns relating to international cooperation and assistance, and to be more keen on other possible important issues for consideration at BMS 8 and the 4th Review Conference. In the past several informal consultations on BMS 8, I have had the good fortune of having smooth and fruitful discussions with delegations. Your substantive inputs have helped the Chair shepherd the group to coming up with progressive versions of the outcome document in the last several weeks. I hope we continue this momentum until the week itself of BMS 8. In this regard, I wish your region a fruitful discussion on BMS 8 over the next hour, and I look forward to seeing all of you in New York next week. Thank you, and good day to all.
On behalf of UNIDIR and ODA, we'd like to express our great appreciation and tremendous thanks to His Excellency Ambassador Manolo for his support and great interest shown during the preparation of these regional briefings, as well as more generally promoting multilateral conversations on ways to enhance the effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI. We thought this was a great way to start off our panel discussions today. And to continue that excellent level of participation, I'd now like to welcome Dr. Ivor Fung, a dear friend and colleague, Deputy Chief of the Conventional Arms Branch at the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs. Dr. Fung, please, I'll hand over to you now for some more opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to participate in this very important event, especially as it is focusing on Africa. Let me first thank UNIDIR for partnering with the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs for these series of briefings. The UN Office for Disarmament Affairs would be serving as the substantive secretariat for BMS 8 because we are the custodian of the PoA. And we take the participation of states very seriously. What we intend to achieve in this series of briefings is 3 things. One is to enable every region to familiarize itself with the issues that will be addressed by BMS 8. The familiarization is very important, and it will enable the second objective, which we intend to achieve, meaning active participation by all the regions. The African region is very important in this process, not only because it is one of the hard-hit regions when it comes to the small arms issue, but because it has shown strong engagement right from the late 1990s, Africa was the first region to organize a major meeting to show its common position on the issue. This was the Bamako Declaration in the year 2000, which even predates the existence of the PoA. And so Africa has shown, leadership, strong leadership on this issue. But I must say that at a global level, Africa is not felt. We don't see Africa participating, for instance, in the preparatory process. When I was listening to Ambassador Enrique Manolo just now in his video address to this briefing, the whole series of informal consultations, African states don't speak up in great number to translate or to convey the message of the consequences every state in that region is experiencing with the issue of small arms. And so our second objective is to enable states to participate, tell your story, tell your experiences. After all, BMS 8, BMS in short, is an opportunity for states to exchange lessons learned, experiences, and etc. Come forward with what is happening in your continent. Tell your story. Other countries would benefit from it, and you will also benefit from other experiences. The third objective that we really intend to achieve is that, as you know, BMS 8's main focus is on international cooperation and assistance. Without international cooperation and assistance, as all of you know in this continent, most of your work in the area of controlling small arms and light weapons will not go far. So this is your moment. Come forward and tell your story. When we receive national reports from the few countries that they report on their experiences, we see a lot when it comes to the needs expressed. And so we really call on all of you African states. I know they are very able civil society organizations, and I'm happy to see that Eugene Galim from Camiosfop, who is very active in the Central African region, it's going to address you, telling the story of what is happening on the continent and on that sub-region. We, in fact, support the work of civil society, and at BMS 8, this would also be the moment. There are challenges that BMS 8 would be addressing from the first agenda item on implementation of the PoA. You will see the issues of trends and challenges. I myself will be making a presentation on this. On the ITI, it would be the issue of recent technologies and weapons design, which is a very important issue. There too, we will, from the ODA, will be addressing this matter by making a presentation on practical experiences on the marking of polymer and modular weapons. Then finally, with regard to the issue of international assistance that I've already mentioned, and which we take seriously, many of you already know that in 2018, during the review conference, the third review conference, the non-aligned movement presented a proposal, a working paper on the establishment of a fellowship program on small arms and light weapons. This proposal has made some progress because BMS 7 took up that proposal, that working paper, and requested that BMS 8 should further examine it, the opportunity to establish a fellowship program. We from ODA will also be presenting options on how these fellowship program can be established. Now, why we support that very much, we call on all the countries in the framework of international cooperation and assistance agenda item to express yourself. So, my dear friends, you are very welcome to New York. The BMS 8, for those of you who might not be able to come to New York, will be webcasted, meaning you will be able to follow all the former sessions online through the UN TV. So with these words, I wish you a very good briefing, and we look forward to cooperating with you. Thank you once more, Paul.
Thank you so much, Ivor, for the clear explanation of the 3 objectives that you see for the regional briefings, and which of course we echo, and also for giving the participants a hint as to what to expect next week in terms of the challenges, issues to be confronted, and of course the critical issue of cooperation and assistance and the fellowship program in particular. But before looking forward and discussing BMS 8, we thought it might be useful to take stock of where we stand with regards to what happened just last year at BMS 7. And therefore, it's my great privilege to pass over the screen or the floor to my colleague, Mathilde Vecchione. Mathilde will provide us with a brief overview of some of the key issues and the outcomes from BMS 7, and hopefully set the scene for the discussions to come. So with that, over to you, Mathilde.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. And hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so as Paul anticipated, I will provide a scene setter for today's briefing on the preparations for the BMS 8 by highlighting some of the key issues and outcomes from BMS 7. As Dr. Fung kindly anticipated, these are some of the key issues that I will be covering today, namely diversion, measurability and implementation, peace, security and sustainable development, ITI, namely the implications of key developments in manufacturing, technology, and design, and finally, the key issue of international assistance and cooperation. Finally, I will conclude by providing a brief summary of the BMS 7 outcome document. Of course, we will not have time today to cover all the key emerging challenges that are very relevant to the international cooperation, such as 3D printing, illicit conversion of replica, or illicit online trade. But I hope that this will be a good overview to start off today's conversation. Now, I'm well aware that everyone here is more than an expert in this field, but I thought that a short background could still help. So the PoA was adopted by member states in 2001 to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. Some years later, in 2005, the General Assembly adopted the ITI, the International Tracing Instrument, which specifically provides a framework for cooperation in weapons tracing and fulfills one of the commitments that states made as part of the PoA. The latter also includes a periodic review of implementation through Biennial Meeting of States, such as the upcoming BMS 8, review conferences, as well as meeting of governmental experts. As you can see from the timeline below, the upcoming BMS 8 is a bit of an exception in the sense that it occurs only 1 year after the BMS 7 in 2021. This is due, of course, to COVID-19 related reasons. The timeline also shows the upcoming review conference to be held in 2024. Here, I'll provide a short snapshot of the BMS 7 mandate to just recall that this does not only consider key challenges and opportunities related to the implementation of the PoA and ITI, but also aims at preventing and combating the diversion and illicit transfer of small arms and light weapons. For this reason, I'll start today's presentation by touching upon the issue of diversion. So the BMS 7 underlined that the diversion risks can occur at each stage of the life cycle of a weapon. Hence, in manufacturing, before and during transfer, during post-delivery, in stockpiles, as well as in end use and disposal. It also flagged that illicit transfer instances can happen in a variety of circumstances, inter alia cross-border trafficking without appropriate authorization, but also unauthorized state retransfer and during multiple violation of arms embargo imposed by the Security Council. I'd like to highlight at this stage that the PoA is an instrument that contains provisions to prevent, combat, and mitigate diversion, and also calls for national control over the whole life cycle of a weapon. It does so also by providing for the safe, secure, comprehensive, and effective management of stockpiles, hence through adequate marking, record keeping, and inventory management. And it also strengthens, where possible, according to national law, long-term standardized and disaggregated data collection for analysis. Hence, the BMS-7 discussions and outcome document reiterated the importance of implementing the PoA and continuing dialogue and action at national, regional, and international level to prevent diversion. Some kind of a newer issue is that of the measurability and implementation of the PoA. So understand progresses in implementation of this mechanism, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and where can we improve. On this, the BMS-7 focused on encouraging the development and implementation of national action plans, as well as the use of national reports for assessing implementation progresses. It also underlined the importance of strengthening cooperation with entities that are beyond the state, hence civil society, youth, victims, and survivors of armed violence, but also parliamentarians, the industry, and the private sector. It underlined also the importance of collecting disaggregated data by sex, age, disability. I'll touch upon the relevance of this point in a moment, and in the importance of including this disaggregated data in policymaking. Finally, it touched upon the establishment of voluntary national and regional targets, building on the positive experience that some countries and regions reported. And this is also highly relevant for the issue of international assistance, and I will touch upon this point in a moment as well. Within the broader discussion around the PoA, the BMS-7 also stressed the importance of embedding the PoA implementation in broader development frameworks and efforts. Globally speaking, this of course brings us to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, but also at the national level to national development strategies. BMS-7 discussions also aimed at ensuring the full, equal, and effective participation of women in all policy planning and implementation processes, mechanisms, and fora. And for this reason, of course, it encouraged the harmonization of global mechanisms as well as national policies on small arms and light weapons with the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda. Finally, as I anticipated in my discussion below, the BMS-7 also encouraged the use of disaggregated data by sex, age, disability, etc., to inform evidence-based, gender-sensitive policymaking and programming, as well as exchanging ideas, experience, lessons learned, and good practices in this realm. This is something that also Dr. Fang touched upon briefly in his opening remarks. So the importance when it comes to the ITI and its implementation, the importance of discussing implications of development in manufacturing, technology, and design for marking, tracing, and record keeping. The BMS-7 discussion opened the thoughts on these, particularly focusing on polymer and modular weapons, and prompted the BMS-8 to consider the proposal of an open-ended working group to address challenges and opportunities for marking, tracing, and record keeping, specifically in the issue of polymer and modular weapons. This proposal was voted. 100 states voted in favor, only 1 against, and 10 abstained. Finally, the BMS-7 discussions also requested the Secretariat to develop a good practice document on marking practices for polymer and modular weapons. Finally, as anticipated earlier, the issue of international assistance and cooperation is an essential one that has been covered in previous discussion and that will be covered during the BMS-8. BMS-7 explored ways to ensure and further strengthen comprehensive international assistance for the entire life cycle management of weapons. It specifically touched upon cooperation, coordination, but also particularly information sharing mechanisms and how enhancing those can effectively promote assistance programs. It also highlighted the importance of connecting voluntary national and regional targets with resource mobilization, assistance requests, and programs. And finally, it requested the Secretariat to present at BMS 8 funding and administrative arrangements for a dedicated fellowship training program to enhance knowledge and expertise on how to best implement the PoA. Of course, there was also discussions around existing UN assistance mechanisms, such as the Secretary General Saving Lives Entity, Salient, as well as UNSCAR. I'm at my closing slides, so bear with me another couple of minutes. Here, I'll provide a very short summary, not only of the points that we touched upon in this conversation, but also as of the BMS 7 outcome document. As you can see, in terms of the PoA, it touched upon national, regional, and international levels. For what concerns the national level, emphasis would put on the importance of implementing the PoA provisions to prevent diversion, but also to address emerging challenges and strengthen measurability and implementation of the PoA. At the regional level, focus was put on encouraging regional instruments, roadmaps, and action plans, and at the same time promoting regional cooperation and cross-border cooperation. At the international level, as anticipated, a focus was put on creating the linkages between existing mechanisms, armed violence, and broader peace, security, and sustainable development efforts and framework. For what concerns the ITI, a strong focus was put on addressing recent development in manufacturing, technology, and design, in particular for what concerned polymer and modular weapons. Finally, as previously said, international cooperation and assistance to implement both the PoA and the ITI is a cross-cutting and extremely relevant issue, especially when it comes to discussing also the linkages with voluntary, national, and regional targets. With this, I'll stop here. I look forward to hearing my colleague's presentation, and I thank you all for your attention. Paul, I give you back the screen.
Thank you, Mathilde, for a very useful reminder of some of the key issues and outcomes from last year's BMS 7. And I think that several of the issues you highlighted, we expect to see discussed further next week, and you signaled to us already, again, echoing some of Iva's points about what we can expect. It's now my great privilege to welcome our colleague from the UN Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Africa, Jiaming Miao. Great to see you. I know we're extremely happy that you're able to join us while we know you're on mission. So thank you for contributing to this briefing while you're juggling other commitments. We're very much looking forward to you sharing your views on the perspectives, experiences, and highlights on implementation of the PoA and the ITI in Africa. And so without any further ado, I'll hand over the screen to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul, for giving me the floor. First of all, please, I'd like to express my warm greetings to all distinguished delegates and also partners that are connected to this webinar. My name is Jiaming Miao, and I work at the UN Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Africa. So we are by Africa, and we are for Africa. In fact, that we were established in 1986, subsequent to the recommendation by the Africa Regional Group. So we are based in Lomé in Togo, and we have been working in Africa since 1986. So just a little blurb about, about UNREC. Secondly, I'd like to also convey the greetings from my director, Mr. Anselm Yaburi, who unfortunately cannot make the briefing much as he would have wished to otherwise. But the good news that he will be in New York attending BMS next week. So in case if you want to have a personal chat with him, please do let me know, and you will find my contacts on this cover slide. Thirdly, I would like to say that Dr. Fong and also my colleague from UNIDIR, Mathilde, have given a very concise historical overview of the PoA chronology, subsequent ITI, and also give a flavor about what forthcoming BMS 8, and also give a very good synopsis of the outcome of the BMS 7. And also in between, they have also mentioned about related processes revolving around the program action that include the review conference, also the biennial meeting of states, as well as a meeting of government experts. So I think that make my presentation much easier. I might have to skip some of the slides as they have been covered by previous speakers. However, I would highlight that the focus of my presentation has three folds. One is just to present us to you so that you can always reach out to us for support or for any related assistance. Secondly, my presentation will focus on give a snapshot view, the update, the status where we are in Africa with regard to the PoA processes. So you will see some statistics and also pie charts in my presentation. And thirdly, and which is also important, is that I will explain the process just in case if any particular member states would like to request for assistance, what is the process? And also I would like to offer kind of assistance that are available at UNREC, at the regional center. So in doing so, I will give a sample project just for your information. So now please allow me to move on to my presentation. Next slide, please. Program, I think despite that the previous speakers have introduced about the program action, but I think it is important for us to go through the main chapters under the program action, revolving around which, in fact, the reporting, the national reporting, as well as type of assistance that are available, this table of content under the PoA provide the basis for that structure. So I think I would just like to read them through so that would provide a mental framework for us as we go through the subsequent slides. So first and foremost, it provides legislation in terms of various aspects of the production, transfer, and also diversion of small arms and live weapons. And then move on to more operational aspects in terms of marking, record keeping, and tracing, as well as stockpile management and security of arms and ammunition depot. Equally, also with regard to the surplus weapons, ammunition identification and disposal. So these covered more the operational aspects, but also with regard to the transfer, regulating the trade, you have provisions in terms of international transfer, brokering. Also on the demand side, you have public awareness. Also on some cross-cutting issues, you have the disarmament, demobilization, and the integration programs. So I think these thematic focuses really set the basis and outline the structure for national reporting, for requesting for assistance. So that's why I want to lay this out so that we move forward with this structure in mind. One of the important requirements for PoA is voluntary national reporting. I'm very pleased to say that since its inception in 2001, so far, out of the 193 UN member states, we have received reports from 177 member states. Next slide, please. So the PoA, we talked about a variety of processes under the program action, and also the involvement subsequent to the inception of the PoA. that mainly include the international tracing instrument, which facilitate international cooperation in terms of tracing of arms. And more on the pragmatic level, if a particular member states want to request for assistance, United Nations Office on Disarmament Affairs, through a mechanism called the United Nations Actions, Coordinated Actions on Small Arms, really have a streamlined all relevant guidance, standards, SOPs, etc. that have resulted in a little booklet. It's called a Modular Small Arms Control Implementation Compendium. So in abbreviation, we call it Mosaic. So this Mosaic, which I will cover in my subsequent slides, really is a go-to reference material, just in case if you wish to request for assistance. We will talk more about in subsequent slide. Next, please. Program action is highly relevant. Since its inception in 2001, you know that a range of global norms, standards, and also regional instruments have been introduced. But I can confidently to say that many of them, they can trace back to a ranging in 2001. I think Dr. Fang, I'm very grateful that he has highlighted in 2000, the Bamako declaration by the African member states, really at that point in history, showed the leadership also contributed to final adoption, the program action in 2001. So I just want to say that subsequent to those developments, we now have a range of global and regional instruments that include the Arms Trade Treaty that has entered into force in 2014. So, which is really to address the supply side of arms transfer, etc. So it mandatorily requires the supplier side, the member states, to conduct a rigorous risk assessment before any such a transfer is made. And also equally, it also requires compliance by the recipient member states in terms of marking and also the registration of the arms. At our regional level, we have the ECOWAS Convention, we have the Kinshasa Convention, Nairobi Protocol, and the SADC Protocol. But most of these protocols and regional instruments gain its inspiration from the program of action. So I just want to provide that overview of these global and regional instruments, which really serve as a normative framework. So when you talk about the disarmament, these are the bundle of reference materials so we can turn to. So next slide, please. Following the introduction of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, which really highlights the nexus between peace and development. So there is a specific SDG target under the goal 16 on peaceful societies. There is a specific target which is articulated in paragraph 58 of the 2030 agenda that requires member states to report on the proportion of the seized or destroyed or collected weapons that member states have been able to trace its origin. So this indicator is among the indicators that really help to track our progress towards the attainment of SDG Goal 16 on peaceful society. I have to say that United Nations Office on Disarmament Affairs is the custodian of this indicator. PoA is such a wonderful instrument that has given birth to a range of global and regional instruments. However, its implementation now have faced many challenges. Let's just name a few. Next slide, please. next, yeah. Information sharing on defense and security can be challenging to some, so which might impact on the data reporting and the sharing. So I think this rose concerns among some member states. Also, there are some with limited technical and financial resources, that can also hamper implementation by member states and regional organizations. Yesterday, I had the honor to serve in the same panel with Eugene, whom you will hear from, that in fact, some member states have voiced a concern. They say that, the bill to establish the national coordinating bodies to fight the illicit provision of small arms like weapons, they are there. However, in terms to come up with matching resources to operationalize such coordinating bodies, including the national commissions, are challenging especially to some countries in Africa. So this is one of those objective obstacles that we have to face. And also equally during the COVID time, when member states divert their attention to COVID response or post-COVID recovery, sometimes there are priorities among priorities. There are more priorities than other priorities. So this is also one of the challenges that some member states face in our region. I have to say also, reporting to fill out a questionnaire itself can be burdensome, especially that requires interagency coordination. But you will see from the subsequent statistics I will share, many countries, they still do not have an interagency coordination mechanism in place. So that might also explain the low reporting rate. I think that gives you a glimpse in terms of some of the challenges we face. I'm sure that when I go through the pie charts and statistics, we will see them more in detail. Next slide, please. There are opportunities as well. I just want to highlight that, this sharing of information, that also serve as a confidence building. Sometimes, when thinkers in school, you have your own lunchbox, but you also want to see your classmates, what are there in their lunchbox. So this could be confidence building measure. I also have to say that the section 9 of the national reporting template really allows member states to articulate type of assistance they need. So they also, serve as a good platform to solicit international assistance. Next slide, please. Let me give a little snapshot about the status so far as we speak. So for 2022, 95 of the submitted reports, they use the time reporting template developed actually by Dr. Fong and his team. And also, now UNODA endeavors try to streamline the reporting. So they use a lot of yes and no questions, and also give member states the opportunity to submit the reports, and just by updating the past reports they have submitted. And also you can submit the report in any of the 6 official United Nations languages. Another important support that is available is that once member states you register your credential, there is also help desk available. So you can always request for assistance to walk you through that reporting template and guide you step by step. Here comes some interesting slides. So you will see that among the 177 states that have reported so far, we see this dramatic dip. Only 75 reported. That was reduced from 97 in 2020 and 120 in 2018. So this trend is really worrisome. So let's take a look at Africa. So next slide, please. So far we have 24 member states in Africa out of 54 that have submitted the national reports. So I hope you will have a sense of pride when you see that the country you represent are listed there. Next slide, please. I have only 1 minute left. So you will see that I think in Africa, we should take pride. More than half of the weapons destroyed between 2020 and 2021, the light blue, actually you found them in Africa. I think that's a sense of accomplishment. Next slide, please. So I just want to point out one highlight. Please pay attention to see the first three pie charts. You will see the green area, 22 member states who have national coordinating body, and the other ones who tend to submit reports. They are among the 24 member states who have submitted national reports. So among the 24 who have submitted, 22, they have national coordinating agency, and the 10 of them, they have national action plan. So this is just to say the utility of having a national interagency coordinating agency. So next, please, I'm about to finish. So now it really come to the highlight of the presentation is that on section 9 of the PoA report, you will see the A, B, C, D, E, F, G among the 9 areas. They really echo to the structure that I highlighted in the initial presentation under the PoA provision. Unfortunately, I think I only have 1 minute. We won't have time to go through the, please, the next slide, please. I just beg for 1 minute. Let me to go through the mosaic. Next slide, yeah, next slide, next slide. Yes, next slide, yes, wonderful. So, so as I said, it's a modular small arms implementation compendium. So this is really the go-to reference on a practical level for everybody. So you will see these 6 dots that explain to you the change theory, how this reference bring about the change. So the first dot, the first circle you will see, member states, all of you have worked collectively and developed the range of global normative, global and regional instruments that include the PoA, ITI, Firearms Protocol, ATT, etc. Then the second circle, United Nations, translate these norms into practical guidance, which also we share this booklet with member states and partners. So for you to seek for specific support among the 6 chapters. So then once you receive specific assistance on those 6 thematic areas, that would contribute to the attainment of your national action plan, that would also ultimately contribute to the curb the illicit flow of small arms and live weapons, and also contribute to the attainment of SDG target 16.4. So eventually you will see the last circle that will reduce armed violence and related deaths. So please allow me to conclude my presentation right here. I would like to encourage all distinguished delegates and partners to reach out to UNREC for support and for assistance. And I welcome your questions during the discussion session. And thank you for the honor to present to you. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Jiaming, for a very rich presentation, providing us not just with some of the challenges that you're encountering, indeed, giving us a fresh perspective from your current mission, but also I think highlighting, as you did, some of the positive developments and some of the opportunities that are available via UNREC and others to address some of the gaps and overcome some of those challenges. So from my perspective, fantastic to hear from you, and apologies for cutting you short. I'm well known to be a strict chair, as Amélie can attest to from previous engagements, but I think that was very helpful. And again, as you said, encouraging people to get in touch with you either today or through other mechanisms. Finally, I'd like to conclude today's briefing with a contribution from the International Action Network on Small Arms, IANSA. As I know everyone on this call knows, IANSA has been particularly active in preparations for BMS 8, strongly advocating for the importance of effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI. And I'd like to begin by thanking Amélie Namaroy, the IANSA project officer, for joining us to share some highlights and some I think, some good recommendations for those of you that will be participating in BMS 8 next week. And then we'll have the pleasure of hearing from Eugene Nagalim, the Executive Director of Cameroon Youths and Students Forum for Peace, an organization that he played a leading role in founding. We very much value your important interventions. Apologies if we overrun slightly today, colleagues, but I think it's important to hear from both Amélie and Eugene. And I propose that as soon as Amélie finishes, Eugene, please take the screen. And so therefore, over to you, Amélie, and to Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure for myself and for IANSA to be part of this regional briefing in preparation for BMS 8. I would like to thank UNIDIR for the invitation, and especially for thinking of a creative and effective way to bring together stakeholders in the lead up to BMS 8, and for supporting the participation of civil society organizations during this briefing. I would like to briefly reflect on the key issues that, from IANSA's perspective, should be taken into consideration by member states during next week's discussions. All 6 key issues that IANSA has identified as needing particular attention at BMS 8 focus on previous progress. Each biennial meeting of states or review conferences have provided material and precedents for the meetings that follow. It's critically important, therefore, for the previous outcome document to serve as a floor for the consideration of proposals and not a ceiling. The illicit trade, proliferation, and misuse of small arms and light weapons for violence and crime is changing, and states need to address those changes. Millions of people around the world continue to be affected by violence and abuses committed or facilitated by the irresponsible use of such arms. Following now is an overview of our 6 key issues. For each of the following key issues, I will briefly indicate why this issue has been identified by IANSA as needing particular attention. First, building on the gender outcomes of REFCON 3 and BMS 7 and ensuring the inclusion of other traditionally underrepresented groups such as survivors, youth, and those most vulnerable to the effects of armed violence. As originally approved, the PoA gave little attention to affected communities and underrepresented groups. The words gender, youth, and survivors were not even included in the 2001 text, for example. Through efforts of civil society and diplomatic partners, we've made significant progress on inclusion in the last several years, but there is still much work to be done in that area. One measure of progress is the extent to which members of traditionally underrepresented groups speak for their delegation. Second, enhancing provision for the collection and destruction of small arms and light weapons and their ammunition. The timely destruction of illicit, obsolete, and surplus SALW and ammunition is a primary method of preventing the excessive and destabilizing accumulation of such material and ensuring it will not be diverted to illicit markets or to unauthorized end users or end uses. Securing legal stockpile and decommissioning illicit, obsolete, and surplus weapon is important and can decrease the risk of diversion. Third, moving forward on developing national targets for the implementation of the UN PoA. Another positive development included in the BMS 7 outcome document was the proposal that states consider setting voluntary national and regional targets to support the implementation of the PoA and the ITI. Setting such targets for both small arms and light weapons and their ammunition would allow states to supplement existing more general goals with more specific measurable objectives they themselves have developed. This could increase the ownership of each country in the resulting activities and their success, while also improving accountability as long as the objectives are consistent with the implementation of the PoA and ITI. Fourth, ensuring attention to synergies among instruments that are critical to preventing small arms and light weapons proliferation, violence, and harm. One of the most contentious issues in the PoA process in recent years has been the extent to which outcome documents should acknowledge potential synergies between the PoA and other instruments, like, for instance, the UN Firearm Protocols and the Arms Trade Treaty. The illicit arms trade is a complex issue involving a wide range of potential factors, but taking advantage of synergies among relevant international as well as regional instruments that address the trade in small arms and light weapons can help increase their collective power to control this trade and reduce its human cost. Fifth, increasing attention to the need for sustainable international cooperation and assistance in implementing the PoA and ITI. So as some of my colleagues mentioned earlier, fully implementing the PoA and ITI involve tasks with a wide range of cost and complexity. Some of these tasks may involve moderate cost in some countries with significant infrastructure and far larger cost in countries that lack infrastructure. A common response to this situation is to view international cooperation and assistance as something that flows from wealthier countries to less wealthy ones. But it is also possible to have cooperation. Oh, I'm so sorry. It is also possible to have cooperation among countries with high level of resources. And importantly, there is also the possibility of peer-to-peer cooperation between and among countries that have fewer material resources. 6, setting a robust agenda and mandate for REFCON 4. One of the key tasks for BMS 8 will be establishing a mandate for the 4th Review Conference on the Program of Action and the International Tracing Instruments, REFCON 4, which will take place in 2024. REFCON 4 offers a critically important opportunity to propose programs and actions to improve the implementation of the UN PoA and ITI. So for more information on these issues, please refer to IANSA's publication that will be up on our website in upcoming days, and that we will also be sharing during BMS 8. Sorry again for the interruption, and I thank you very much. And I now proudly pass the floor to my colleague, Eugene Engalim. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul, Amélie, Mian, Dr. Fung, and all those who are on this webinar. And again, I am the chair or the president of the Cameroon Action Network on Small Arms. Cancer created in 2004. That said, my presentation, which is going to be very brief, is on an overview of small arms and light weapons issues in Africa. And of course, the plan for my presentation includes an introduction, setting up of mechanisms for regulating small arms and light weapons and reporting on PoA, CSO support to African states on the implementation of the PoA and other regional instruments, lessons learned from working on regional instruments on arms control, and priorities for African states for the BMS. Again, I wish to note that the phenomenon of the illicit proliferation of small arms have continued to be very crucial for Africa, and as such, jeopardizing the peace, security, and the stability of the continent. As such, conflicts in Africa have also moved from interstate to internal conflicts caused either by terrorists, such as the Boko Haram, the El Shabaab, separatist fighters, or coup d'etats and undemocratic change of government. And quite a number of African countries are faced with these conflicts. Including the DRC, Cameroon, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Mozambique, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger, and so on and so forth. And because of these conflicts, about 40 to 100 millions of small arms and light weapons circulate in the continent, making implementation of the PoA and other regional instruments such as the Nairobi Protocol, the ECOWAS Convention, the SADC Convention, and the Kinshasa Convention a bit difficult to implement. Now, setting up of mechanisms for regulating small arms and reporting on the PoA. One of the most effective mechanisms for regulating small arms and light weapons recommended by the PoA and all the other regional instruments in Africa is the creation of national commissions on small arms and light weapons. Unfortunately, out of the 54 member states of the African Union, only 24 have got national commissions on small arms and light weapons. And so therefore it becomes difficult to coordinate actions around this issue. NATCOMs facilitate the development of national action plans and effective implementation of both regional and national instruments. Unfortunately, because of the lack of these national commissions, very few of these states also have national action plans. Again, reporting on the PoA by African states has fluctuated over the years, falling from 35 states in 2018 to 24 in 2020. And I think Miao actually did explain on this or presented on this. And of course, you can relate this to national commissions on small arms and light weapons, considering the fact that out of the 24 reporting this year, 22 of those states are states with national commissions that do coordinate actions and facilitate reporting on the PoA. Now, as CSOs, how do they support African states on the implementation of PoA and other regional instruments? Civil society has been involved in engaging African states in the universalization and the implementation of the various regional and national instruments on small arms and light weapons. I think we've done a great job in this, especially mobilizing member states of ECAS in Central Africa on the ratification of the Kinshasa Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons and the ratification of the ATT, the Arms Trade Treaty, particularly Cameroon, because we were able to work with Cameroon and facilitate the process in 2018. And before we could conclude the VTF funding we had received, Cameroon had ratified. So CSOs have played very great roles in facilitating the universalization and the implementation of the PoA and various regional instruments. PoA also provides technical and operational capacities in the implementation of these instruments. I wish to take the case of CAM USFOR, which I'm the executive director. And for close to 5 years, we've been able to build the capacities of member states, especially in Central Africa. Starting in 2018, where we went from state to state, building their capacities, especially on mosaic, on the use of mosaic in the implementation of the PoA, especially in creating and revamping national commissions on small arms and light weapons, establishing national action plans, and also getting women and youth involved in issues of small arms and light weapons. In 2020 or 2021, we were able to bring the 11 member states of ECAS together, again, training them on collection, on data collection of SDG 16.4.2 and the ITI. And in 2022, this year, we shall be developing a reporting mechanism for PoA and the Kinshasa Convention for Central Africa. Thanks to UNSCA. So all these projects have been funded by UNSCA. Civil society also generates momentum within states on reporting on the PoA. I want to take the case of national dialogues that were organized by IANSA with members engaging their states, and we did that for Cameroon. Brainstorming on key priority issues for Cameroon prior to the BMS. And so this is one of the ways that CSOs do engage member states. Apart from that, there are also capacity buildings, specific capacity buildings of member states that CSO do undertake. And I wish to take the case of CAMUSFOR. This year, for example, we are starting a training, a course with the International Relations Institute of Cameroon and with the support of ONREC and REXA, ECOSOC, and we are looking forward to the African Union and the UN Institute for Training and Research to support this course, which is basically going to be a course on diplomacy of arms control, proliferation, and disarmament. And this is going to be a continental course. And so therefore, it's a course that we intend to help member states, especially on issues around small arms and light weapons. Now, after working on issues of small arms and light weapons, what are the lessons learned, especially in the implementation of regional instruments? We learned that most instruments are well written, but unfortunately, sometimes ratification and implementation is very slow. There is also lack of both technical and operational capacities by most African states, with serious challenge on the implementation of most of the regional and national instruments. And by extension, this has hampered the regular reporting of the instruments ratified. Thirdly, there is an issue of government will. Government will, and of course, the process, government will, which do affect the process of setting up institutions that facilitate the implementation of most of the regional instruments ratified. For example, I just spoke about the NATCOMs and of course, elaboration of NAPs. Again, very few stakeholders, including relevant government institutions and even members of parliament, are aware of most of the existing instruments and mechanisms on small arms and light weapons on the continent. And finally, what could be some priority actions for African states prior to BMS 8? I think one of the priority actions, which I think should be hammered on, is on the creation of NATCOMs, National Commissions on Small Arms, or coordinating organs on small arms, and elaborating on national action plans. Equally, there is need for continuous collection. We're talking here about the Africa Amnesty Month. And the Africa Amnesty Month is a month of voluntary collection of weapons in the continent as part of the AU flagship program on silencing the guns in Africa. So we think continuous collection and destruction of weapons should be something that should be taken forward, especially as the UN has been able to collaborate with the AU in supporting this program. Thirdly, there is need to strengthen border controls to cut off supplies from insurgencies, such as the Boko Haram, the Al-Shabaab, the secessionists and gangs. So there is need for this to be a priority issue for African states. Thirdly or fourthly, there is need to improve on stockpiles, on security stockpile, because some of the weapons that get into illegal hands do come from some of the stockpiles, either from state stockpiles or private armories. So there is need to improve on the security of stockpiles. Fifthly, there is need to engage members of parliament as key players, especially in the adoption of legislation. The fact that they don't even have information, they don't have knowledge about these instruments, therefore means there's need for them to be engaged. And they have a key role to play because they are the ones in charge of adopting various legislations around issues of small arms and light weapons. And finally, there is need for mainstreaming gender in small arms and light weapons in line with the women, peace, and the security agenda. And so this is very key. And we think there is need for the revision of most of the legislations that are already in place to make sure that this agenda is streamlined in most of those legislations that have been adopted. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eugene, and thank you also, Amelie. From my side, you gave not just some useful preparation guidance in terms of objectives for next week's BMS, but actually some broader priorities, I think, for work in this domain moving forward. I especially appreciated the way in which you talked about the evolution in thinking and what needs to be done to tackle the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, and from you, Eugene, focusing upon that building of capacity at the national level and the wonderful work that can be done with civil society in partnership to achieve some fantastic results, which I think echoed throughout all of the presentations today. So thank you so much for really reinforcing that message. And thank you to all the participants who've stayed with us beyond the hour, which shows that I think we've highlighted some important issues here. And I think you'll join with me in saying sincere thanks to all of the panelists for great contributions and reflections in preparation for BMS 8. From my side, I want to thank my colleagues behind the scenes at UNIDIR and ODA, and in particular, Ruben Nicolan, who sat in both sides over his time. And finally, a big thanks to all of you participants that have engaged in the discussion today. And we hope that today's event has contributed towards your preparations for a successful BMS 8. I've also included in the chat a link to a brand new, actually fresh off the press, UNIDIR Weapons and Ammunition Management in Africa Insight, our 2022 update, which gives you some lessons learned from the past few years of working with several African states to identify areas for priority action in weapons and ammunition management. It's available in both English and French. We strongly recommend you read, use, and please, as always, get back to us with any thoughts, reflections, or contributions. I also wanted to remind you all that you can watch this event again, pick up on those issues you missed, or even to show it to your colleagues. We'll be posting the recording shortly on the UNIDIR website, and I'm sure that all presenters would be happy to share their slides with you if you approach them too. With that, as we've approached almost 15 minutes after the presentations, thank you all so much for your time. And if there are, I just see some questions that we'll relay to individuals and get back to you. But thank you so much. Wishing you all the best for the rest of the day. And I hope that those of you who will be in New York next week will hunt out the panelists and engage with us individually. Thank you so much. With that, I'd like to close the briefing and look forward to seeing you all in other occasions. Thank you so much.